Yo, now it's the Red Blue Podcast crew. Reviewing flicks, both old and new. Red and blue, not political. Nah, man, chill. It was Marvel versus DC till we lost that thrill. Don't stress the episode, don't ask the season. We double up franchises, don't ask for a reason. Mochi's got rules that nobody gets. His takes on movies, they're wild as it gets. He's got Superbald Mac and Gray by his side, trying to keep it sane while they're in for the ride. Mochi's measures are out of control, but in the end he's got the final role. Yeah, that Blue Podcast, come check the scene. Movies old and new, know what I mean?
And we are live, and we had a very weird glitch right now, but we are live talking about two Marvel classic with a vampire that deletes other vampire. How are you, Superbald?
I'm doing all right, you?
I'm doing great. My mic died, unfortunately. Rest in peace, microphone.
Yeah,
10
we're hearing
years.
you. We're hearing you just fine right now, though.
That's great, but amazing. Like 10 years of service. That was one of a mic.
Yeah, you got your money's worth.
Yeah. How are you, Gray?
Doing good. I mean, so far, this week could always get worse, but so far so good. Much better week.
Amazing. So I guess we kind of go to the second intro, the less cool one, but the still cool one. So, Gray, why Blade?
Well, I think it's the end of that list. But again, you gave me you told me to give you a list of like 20 good flicks. Apparently, one of them you had already done, so I had to replace it, and that ended up being Blade 2 was the replacement. But man, I've just always dug Blade. I don't know why I always had it when I was a kid. Like I probably had it too young, but. Man, it was like my introduction to superhero movies. Like, yeah, there was like Howard the Duck that came out in like 86 or something like that. But other than that, we had like the Batman movies, and that was kind of it. Like, this is what kind of launched like real comic book movies. And from there, you got to do a whole bunch of other ones. But man, this kind of paved the way for Fox's X-Men. Before that, it's like, you'd have little cameos, and it was kind of like a nerdy thing, like the possible Thor cameo and like Adventures in Babysitting or whatever. But you didn't have like full on like comic book movies. The one exception is Batman, who's been there since the 60s. But yeah, it got real cheesy because I think Batman and Robin was like the year before this one. So we're really into like the full cheese superhero thing again. And people didn't really think it could work, but man, this set a lot of things in motion. So I don't know. Blade 1 has always just had kind of a soft spot in my heart. And I don't know why I completely keep forgetting about Blade 2. I want to forget about Blade 3, and I can't. But the first two are really good.
The less said about Blade 3, the better.
Yeah. Yes. Multi, you should check it out. You'll love it. But for everybody else, just avoid Blade 3. But yeah, so I think Blade 2 is kind of your suggestion. It's like, yes, let's pair those two together. But Blade 1's awesome. It's iconic, man. It really shaped me as a person.
It's interesting because I got a similar experience than you with this movie, because as a child I did end up watching that way too young. It was like on TV, and I don't know how, I don't know why, but I was able to see, I think I've seen all of the three, but the third one I can't remember. But I remember seeing the first two for sure. Way too young. So we are in the same boat. And this is a classic. So when you chose these two, I was like, oh, let's rediscover that like 20 years after I've seen both or something like that. And
so they're ancient films to you. I get it.
Yeah, they are ancient. They are these relics. It's like Indiana Jones finding trophies or something. So Superbald, what's your experience with Blade?
I really hate when you say stuff like that, dude.
I know.
Movie that
None of
these
my skins
movies are
fit.
ancient. Because I was like, I don't know, like 17, 18 when I saw this movie. This came out when I was 17. um, yeah, I had not seen this in a very long time, though. I remember liking it when it came out. Rewatched it a few times after that, but it had been a very long time, so there's a lot of stuff I'd forgotten. Um, yeah, it still holds up, although it is very much a product of its time. It's very late 90s. The rave, an Apple PowerBook, um, the aesthetic. This came out a year before The Matrix, and it has a lot of the same aesthetic, especially the fashion, the lighting, that kind of stuff. It's very in the same genre. Uh, that computer animation of like the excuse me, the program that decodes the ancient language. It reminds me a lot of like the computer animation for like movies like Lawnmower Man and stuff like that. So it is very much a product of its time. And some of the CG in it is pretty bad. It has not aged well. um, excuse me. Um, but yeah, it still holds up. Wesley Snipes, I thought, was the perfect choice for this. A lot of people have accused Wesley Snipes of not having a big acting range. I don't necessarily agree, but his sort of like very emotionless portrayal in this movie is awesome. But he is quite funny in lots of places. Especially that scene in the hospital where he turns around to the cops and he's like something like, "Motherfuckers, you out of your damn mind." Chris Christopherson, who actually passed away a few months ago. Great, yeah, Stephen Dorff. He was kind of a sort of a big thing at the time. And Boucher Wright, I had to look her up on IMDb. I have not seen anything else that she was in. Udo Kier, who turns up in everything. He's German, so he often ends up playing Nazis. He was also Yuri in the Red Alert 2 video game. I remember that. But no, as Great said, this kind of like launched. This was sort of like the test case for like superhero movies, and I think this really did help to launch that whole thing. Because yeah, as he said before that, hadn't had a whole lot of superhero movies. The Batman franchise, Superman franchise in the late 70s, early 80s. And I think maybe the year before this one, there was also Spawn from Todd McFarlane. There was a movie based on that, but that was
I
very
did see it,
that
and
was
you're right.
that was very kind of niche. So I think it was more Blade than anything that kind of helped to launch that. Um, Great action sequences. Of course, it has a lot tropes of every action movie of like where the henchmen all stand around waiting their turn to fight to fight the hero. But thousands of movies have done that. So, um, yeah, apparently this movie when it came out though, it actually dislodged Saving Private Ryan from first place at the box office. Mind you, Saving Private Ryan had already been out for like about a month or so at that time, so it was kind of inevitable that something that would happen. But still, it was a great success. Um, and obviously it led to two other sequels. A sequel which is very good, and another one which is terrible. um, the dynamic between like Blade and Whistler sort of reminds me of like Batman and Alfred in a way. It's not quite the same thing, but that kind of there were. I don't think it was intentional, but there were there were sort of like allusions to that. Um, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Um,
Oh yeah.
one of the vampires at the beginning, the one who leads the dude to the rave to get eaten, was played by Tracy Lords, who was a former porn actress, and actually all of her. Apparently, all but one of her porn movies are now illegal because she was actually underage when she made them. So it is actually illegal to own them.
That is a weird.
Disgusting.
Well, I mean, it's
Yeah.
history, sir. Come
Yeah.
on.
What?
But she made a
But
legitimate
she's
career after
yeah,
that.
but she's like one of the few people in the pornography industry who sort of more or less transitioned into mainstream. She's been in other movies as well. She's never done anything big, but she's played like bit parts here and there in a lot of movies.
At least they are no longer available. That's one good thing. Good riddance. So I guess I will go second, and I will say that I really enjoyed it. Surprise, surprise! I like the second one a bit more, but this one is still solid. I had a great time, and I don't know why it took that long for me to rewatch. I think the last time I did happen to see that movie was probably like 15 years ago. It was a bit more age appropriate, even if it wasn't. It's better than like being 10 years old and watching that. Um, yeah, I enjoyed my most recent viewing, and I thought that was very interesting how Blade was just using the girl as bait early on in the movie, but as the movie went on, he kind of start caring for her. So that's kind of cool. Because at the very end, you can see he doesn't really want her to turn, but they do it to stop the bad guy, and it's kind of cool. The one thing I will say is I thought the guy died, and spoiler, he's back in the second one, and that's a letdown, I guess.
Yeah, the way they brought him back is very contrived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Outside of that, the action is peak. The action is just entertaining, and I like it. Um, my only issue, and I will get flamed for that, but let's do this. My only issue was plot armor during the escape plan. There was a big firefight with Blade, the girl, and the sidekick and the villains, yet nobody got injured despite spraying rifle shots everywhere. Um, I hated that part. I was like, man, you were perfect up to that point, movie. Why?
That's your only problem?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not flaming you for having that opinion. I'm just flaming you for not noticing, like, everything else. Like, when they're in the subway, there's a train coming, all of a sudden Chris Christopherson, like, falls down and you just don't see him again for, I don't know, until, like, the end of the scene where you see him jump down the sewer grate, where it's like, what? He's just a human, and he's there, like, falling on a subway track. I don't know. It seems like there's more that you could have issue with if you're just going with that.
I didn't notice that, to be honest. Maybe I was just hooked on the movie. I don't know. But I didn't notice it. Now I'm sure next time I will watch it, that will be on my mind, and that will bother me a lot. But this time around, I like that movie a lot. And at the end, the girl sacrificing herself for Blade to stop the bad guys, that was cool. Blade going after the bad guy for revenge was also entertaining, even if it's kind of taken away with the sequel. At least the intent is there with that movie. And again, the action is peak. Wesley Snipe, I just massacred his name. Wesley Snipe. Yeah, I got it better now. He was perfect for the role. So now for the next actor that will portray him, good luck. I mean, really good luck. How can someone beat him? I mean, he even came back for Deadpool and Wolverine, and that was cool. And like 30 years older, but still, that was cool.
Well, because of that, he actually has the record now that this is the longest running continual character. It was Hugh Jackman before, but he came back. So you can't beat his record. Nobody can.
That's true. People will most likely die of old age before such thing happen. I also thought the music was really cool. Maybe I'm crazy, but the music was fitting for like that movie. and I enjoyed it a lot. And
It's
well,
very much of its era too. I mean, electronic music was pretty much in its infancy at the time. Well, not necessarily in its infancy, but raves and stuff were really big at the time. It was really the beginning of that.
yeah, and here is a note for Zack Snyder. This all you use slow mo, like the few slow mo we had in that movie. This all you use them. So he should watch Blade and learn from Blade. So that was me shooting bullets at Snyder. Anyway, overall, Blade for me is a great experience, and I liked it. And I will let Dre go next.
Yeah. So you guys covered like a ton on this. So yeah, Marvel was not the same thing as it was or as it is now. So Marvel got paid just a flat fee to use this character. Marvel got 25 grand and that's it. And they really did not have like any say in this. They didn't have like, like a Feige or anything. They didn't really have like a film division. They just kind of licensed out things, which was a completely different time. I'm not sure. So the previous Marvel film, the most recent one to this one was Howard the Duck. And I think that was like 86. So it had been a while since they'd done like a full-on comic book movie at Marvel. So I don't know if you're familiar with the actual character of Blade, but man, if you know him as this, like what I have on the screen, or what Wesley Snipes did, you don't know the real Blade. So they really kind of created this character, and then Marvel really loved what they did, and it became that character. But prior to that, he was really a blaxploitation character. He came about in 1973, and he was just the antagonist to Dracula, who came about in issue 10 of Tomb of Dracula. And originally, Blade was just a black dude. He was British. He had an afro, yellow glasses, and a green jacket. And that was kind of it. He was very much along like the Luke Cage lines. Like he was not this at all. And he was just a vampire hunter, didn't have the whole like half-blood thing going, wasn't the damn fear thing. He was just named Eric Cross. He was born in London in a brothel where his mother was bitten while he was being born. The doctor was actually, now I'm forgetting his name, Deacon Frost. So it is kind of the bad guy from this movie, but he was a doctor at the time. And so it's said that Blade got these vampire enzymes, but he wasn't really a vampire or anything like that. He just had a hatred for vampires for killing his mother. But he was raised in that London brothel by a jazz trumpeter, and he actually earned his money when he wasn't vampire hunting by playing trumpet in jazz clubs. So interesting. That's basically all the character was. And he had like this bandolier of either stakes, or sometimes they called them teak knives, like wooden knives. And that's all he was. He was just a vampire hunter who, played the trumpet for some reason. But yeah, he didn't have these cool skills. He didn't have a sword. He wasn't clad in black leather. He wasn't like a half vampire, and he definitely wasn't a daywalker. But as soon as this movie became successful, they immediately wrote that into the comic. And they actually made it as Morbius is the one who bites him and then gives him the half vampire powers, and he becomes a daywalker. And originally,
Really?
Yeah, I'm not kidding. In 99 is when he became a daywalker.
Wow.
This movie came out in 98. But this originally had a Morbius cameo at the end of the movie. There's just some guy, some vampire standing on top of a building with like a flowing cape behind him. It was supposed to be Morbius, but they cut that out. But this is a really interesting film. So it had a budget of 45 million and it ended up making 131 million. So it was a success. It more than tripled their budget. But it was directed by Stephen Norrington, which he had done 2 films prior to this, and he really only did 1 film after this, which was The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He was offered the second one, and he declined because he wanted to go on to bigger, better things. I mean, he got to work with Sean Connery, but I don't know that it was bigger, better things.
Yeah, because that's the movie that made Sean Connery quit the movie business for good.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was shot in Vancouver, and so it was also shot in California for the internal parts of like the abandoned hospital and a bunch of other things. But those shots on the street, like especially when Karen's going to her apartment, man, it made me so nostalgic. Like that is just so Vancouver to me. But it starts out with this amazing red New Line logo that just that gets me in the mood. I don't think I've ever seen the red. I don't think any other movie did the red New Line logo. But it just kind of sets you up. And then, like you mentioned, Superbald, it's very much music of its time, but still, you get that red New Line logo, and you get that
Even
like,
the New
electronic
Line
music.
logo is of its time because they released a lot of like really great movies during that time period, and now I don't even know if that film banner still exists.
Yeah, it definitely lost some of its prestige, but I don't know. I think this is peak for me. They did a couple good things towards the late 90s. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting take on vampires. So again, they have this Deacon Frost character. Sorry, my dog's whining. I hope the mic's not picking that up. But in the comics, he was this doctor that attacked the mother while she was giving birth. But in this, he's like this vampire nightclub owner, which I don't know. That's kind of an interesting turn. I kind of like it more. And then it's got the whole you're not pure blood thing. You're one who got turned. You're not a full vampire. I kind of like that. And then the whole his idea of, why would you care what our food thinks about us type deal. I don't know. There's some really interesting points. Frost is more layered than I initially thought. And then one of the other dudes who got a super expanded role in this is Quinn, the cowboy vampire from the nightclub so you mentioned Tracy Lords. She actually has a tie-in with the second one, oddly enough. But Quinn, the cowboy dude who survives the nightclub thing, he was originally supposed to have a much smaller part. Oh, sorry, my dog is barking. But it's played by Donald Logue, who I just love that dude. Anytime I see him in anything, he really makes anything better. But they thought so on set too. They loved how funny he was, and his part just kept getting expanded. But he was really supposed to be like in that one scene, and I think he delivers the message, and then they get rid of him. But they just loved how funny he was on set, and they just kept filming more and more with him. And then almost every one of his lines, except for that first part, are just him ad-libbing it. And that goes to the point where when he is attacking Karen in the hospital, when he's got like the 3rd-degree burns on him, apparently at one point he slipped and fell and like hit his jaw on the ground. And then they noticed that he was screaming as well as Karen. They had to like cut, and then they looked, and his jaw was completely dislocated. I guess that had been a previous injury. So if he opens his mouth too much, that could happen again. And that with the fall, it just like really messed up his jaw. So they had to rush him from the abandoned hospital they were in to a real hospital. And then they had to warn him that like, okay, we got this guy who's practically naked. He's in movie effects of 3rd-degree burns. So don't be alarmed by that, but we need you to set his jaw. It was just apparently a huge ordeal, which is kind of awesome. But yeah, I guess he freaked out a whole bunch of the people in the real hospital that this dude decked out in like 3rd-degree burns. That's not the issue. Just look at his jaw.
The jaw is worse than the body burn. Okay, that's interesting.
And then they've got some other interesting characters in there, like Pearl. That is an odd choice. I don't think I've seen a vampire quite like that.
Completely forgotten about that character, but yeah, that's a memorable character.
For sure. And I guess it took like 4 people to operate it. The actual suit itself weighed like 400 pounds. But they had to have like one person operate a leg, another person do an arm, another person do, so it was 5 people in all, one person being the actual face of Pearl. But they kind of toned down what Pearl was supposed to be, because there was supposed to be a bunch of discarded like kids' bodies all around Pearl. Pearl was not just gluttonous, but had particular tastes apparently. And it is kind of interesting that like the door to Pearl's lair is actually like a freezer door or one of those like walk-in fridge doors. I'm gonna need like 30 seconds to go shut my dogs up. Sorry.
It's all right.
So I guess it's a takeover shortly while he is away. So that's weird. That particular taste Gray mentioned. That's weird. I'm glad they kind of removed that from the movie.
Yeah, they probably did that to maybe make the wheel a bit more palatable for audiences.
Think so. There's still like reminiscence of that. Like you can kind of see some tiny skeletons and stuff around, but it was going to be way darker. Same thing with as the dudes entering the meatpacking plant that then becomes that nightclub. You see some bodies that are kind of being taken out in these bags. That was also going to be a bigger part of it. That Frost was trying to essentially turn everyone into vampires, and then we're going to need a food supply after that. So he was putting like humans in bags to, package some meals for later. But that kind of just got discarded as well. And then also in that meatpacking plant dance club rave scene, we were going to get one of the first Stan Lee cameos. I mean, sure, Mallrats did it before then, but he was kind of a character. It wasn't just the throwaway Stan Lee cameo. It was just going to be that. He was supposed to be one of the officers that ran in when the place is getting raided or whatever, that find Donald Logue's character on fire, who was kind of crucified. But for some reason, they cut out Stan Lee. I don't know why. It would have been better. It would have been a tradition in all of the Marvel things. But no Stan Lee for this. And in 2004, it was revealed that David Fincher, so the dude who did like Seven, a bunch of like amazing films, he was actually supposed to be the director of this one. He was working with the writer. Now I'm blanking on the writer's name. I have it written down somewhere. David Goyer. Sorry. So he was working on the script with Goyer, and it was just after Seven. I think Seven was released 2 years before this. He helped. Okay, fair enough. But he helped write it, and he was supposed to be the director until he just kind of got cold feet and he had to step away. I think he might have made the right choice. I don't know if he would be on that same level if he did kind of the Blade movie, but man, I would have liked to see his take on Blade. I have a feeling it would have been much grittier. I think the kid thing would probably still be in there. The blood bag thing would probably be more of a deal, but a lot of the good beats, I have a feeling they kind of came from a different mind than Goyer, but I could be wrong. Perhaps I'm not giving Goyer enough credit. But yeah, they only paid Marvel a flat fee of just $25,000 for this, and then they were able to really kind of change what they wanted to. So they gave him his signature weapons. They made him a daywalker. They gave him the leather, which again, I know we went over this, but it really kind of spawned what the public was looking for in kind of superhero things. Like the next year we got The Matrix, and then a couple years after that we got Fox's X-Men, where again it is superheroes, but they're kind of clad in leather. It's kind of I don't know exactly what you want to call that, but the late 90s, early 2000s version of like spandex, I guess. It's interesting, but you mentioned the little bits of slow-mo in this that perhaps Snyder should learn from this. I got a feeling he did. It was watching things like this and The Matrix that just made him fall in love with that slow-mo thing. But there's so many similarities between this one and The Matrix, which there's no way that The Matrix was looking at shots from this and it's like, we need to recreate that. But there's this scene in a lobby of a building where he kind of takes out a whole bunch of people in interesting ways. There are slow-mo of kind of bullet dodging. It's not bullet time. It's not the same thing that they're doing in The Matrix, but then you've got the hero in the black leather coat. I don't know, man. There's similarities. I think it was just in the zeitgeist of the time, but man, this really kind of paved the way for what we ended up getting. And I didn't realize that kind of the last time I watched this. But yeah. So yeah, it led the way for Fox's X-Men and Spider-Man. So the X-Men was like 2000, Spider-Man was 2002. I don't think we would have gotten those, and I don't think people would have taken comic book movies as seriously if they didn't kind of give these guys carte blanche to make like this weird rated R, not what the character is, but loosely based off of it. But I guess they had a whole bunch of issues with this, which is kind of what, all the Marvel movies are plagued with now. Originally, the ending was completely different. So Deacon became this giant, like, blob of blood, and the CG is just horrible. You can still find it online. It was like one of the extras on the DVD, but it is weird. He just becomes this blob of blood that's kind of swirling around, and yeah, Blade then attacks him. But it doesn't have like a face on it. There is no like sword battle at the end. It's just he completes the ritual and he becomes this blob of blood. It really shows you the limitations of CGI, and especially liquid CGI. Like I have no idea how Terminator 2 looks so good still to this day. But man, anybody else that tried to do like liquid, it doesn't seem to be. I don't know. We weren't there for like another 10 years or something like that. But it is some of the worst blood effects. They did it. They showed it to a test audience, and they just absolutely hated it. So they actually had to do kind of extensive reshoots, and they actually had to rewrite some of it to make sure that they could get like that ending kind of the way that it works now. And man, I think they made the right choice, because the original cut was like 140 minutes. I think this ends up being 120. I think it's 2 hours exactly. So there's like an extra 20 minutes, and just there's apparently legends of how disastrous this test screening was. And yeah, they added a lot of extra things. But one of the extra things is so the very last shot of it, where Blade is in Moscow and he's kind of going after this vampire, that was actually supposed to be Whistler. So it's weird. They were supposed to have already turned him, and they were kind of setting up to that way. But it was set up another way in the script initially. So initially, Frost was supposed to win, and he releases the blood wave, and it just turns every human. So the second one was, which they weren't sure that they were going to get a second film, but it was supposed to be kind of like a Mad Max post-apocalyptic one, where he's searching for like a cure to kind of stop this blood wave that already turned everybody. That they weren't sure if they would get enough money to actually make it. They weren't sure if audiences would accept that. So then they switched that to the weird amorphous blood thing. And then the audience hated that. So this one is even plagued with what all these Marvel ones are kind of plagued with, where they just keep doing reshoots and stuff, and they're kind of rewriting on the fly. But this seemed to actually work for me. I really like the way that they kind of did it. It is weird with the Whistler thing, and I guess we'll talk about it in 2 once they decide to bring Whistler back mysteriously. But it is kind of interesting that one of the plot points is, okay, well, she's too far gone. She's probably going to die. This serum isn't going to stop her from being a vampire. And then he completely, he's completely turned. It's been way longer than it was for Karen, but fair enough. That's the next one. But yeah, I really like that they added that sword fight back. It is one of the things that I really remember about this film. There's a bunch of scenes that kind of stick out to me. There's the nightclub scene, but man, that ending where, Wesley Snipes cuts him, and it's just like, I got him. And then all of a sudden you see him kind of come back together with blood. Even with the CG being all weird with that, it still is very iconic. I can still picture it now. And then the silent Wesley Snipes, just mouthing the F word. It's awesome. It is kind of a very iconic scene to me. And I think they finally got that right. But it took them a while to do that. And apparently it was a bunch of reshoots. And they did take the test audience's consideration, which I don't know. Sometimes it can work out for the better. But yeah, after this movie, Marvel realized that they actually had a popular character on their hands. So they completely changed him, and they made him the black-clad character, very leather-bound. He now has a sword, and yeah, he's the Daywalker.
Drives a Dodge
So-
Charger.
It's just, man, it's just interesting. Like, he is nothing like that other character, which is awesome. So there were a few lawsuits involved with this movie. So the creator, well, one of the co-creators, so Marv Wolfman, and I'm blanking on the other person, but Wolfman's the one who brought the suit. So he tried to sue the film company and Marvel for $35 million because he said that his work for hire contract with Marvel didn't cover this, so he should be entitled to a lot more. Sadly, he lost that case. They did, I think it was Goyer, the writer, who did really fight to have the created by, and they've got Marv Wolfman, and I can't remember the second person's name, but they do get a credit. But, you know, I think I'd rather take 25 grand than a credit, but, or sorry, 25 million, 35 million, excuse me, than a credit. You know, I just have a feeling that would mean more to me, but still. And then the other fun part is 3 extras sued the actual studio and the effects company because they're saying that the rave blood left permanent blemishes on their skin. So they were in the rave scene in the beginning. Some of the people getting covered in the blood, apparently permanent blemishes on your skin. I don't know. Would that be worth it to you?
It's
You made part of
USC,
this iconic
bro.
scene.
Guys like
But
to
you-
victimize yourselves, so I guess that was the start of it.
But they made this iconic scene, you know, like they're a part of history. And if somebody asks you, hey, why do you have that red stain all over you permanently? You can say it's because I was in that most iconic scene. But yeah, that would suck. I honestly didn't think about any of the extras getting, you know, permanently reddened from that. But I thought that was going to be one of your negatives.
I
was
really
the,
have
the
no idea
waste of blood.
how that would happen, though. The fake blood would like permanently stain their. I have no idea how that would happen.
I doubt
It was
That's-
unsuccessful. They did not, well, it might have been settled, but it was not a successful lawsuit against the companies. So,
Not surprised.
I mean, it's kind of interesting, but I thought for sure, Multi, that would be one of your knocks on this movie, that you're going to subtract points because, man, that's a waste of blood. Like, why would you just have it rain down on everybody? Like, they're not like, you know, like cats. They're not like licking themselves clean. That's just, it's such a waste of blood. Like, bring everybody, I don't know, blood bags, do the like classic wine glass full of blood, but why are you spraying everybody with blood?
Because that's the movie.
Hey, don't get me wrong. I love it, but it doesn't quite make sense. It looks cool, but yeah. So I don't know. There's a bunch of really cool stuff
I guess
about
it's like
this
one
movie.
of those rays where they spray champagne on everybody. I guess it's their version.
Fair enough. I guess I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, I absolutely love certain aspects of this film. It held up way better than I thought it would. I don't think I've seen it in like a decade, and I was kind of getting ready to be disappointed, and you know, kind of get mad at nostalgia for having me hold this up in such reverence. But yeah, I really dig this movie. I think that's probably about all I have to say. Oh, there is this kind of interesting thing that visually they do. I guess a lot of movies around this time, I think The Matrix even kind of did it. They're doing that kind of like blue color grading, and it's very, it does kind of feel like it's part of its time, where it just has a certain look to it. But that being said, the camera is moving in a bunch of interesting ways in this one. It doesn't feel stagnant like a lot of those other ones do, but it definitely has that feel. And the second one goes a completely different way with visually how it's looking.
Okay, thank you a lot for sharing. Do you want to add anything else?
I think that's about everything.
Superbald, what is your grade out of 10 for Blade 1?
As I said, I find it still holds up. Great movie. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10.
Okay, what about you, Gary?
Yeah. You know, I honestly thought that I'd be putting this one above 2. I remembered 3 really sucking, but yeah, it holds up. It's got a bunch of iconic scenes, like Now I can't remember his name. I know Superbald called him out, but the vampire who's kind of in charge of the Vampire League or whatever.
Udo
I
Kier.
remember. Thank you. I don't have it up in front of me, and I do not remember the name Udo for some reason. It's just in one ear, out the other. But that dude is awesome. He's always iconic in everything he's in. But I definitely remember them taking his teeth and then just standing there and watching him burn, like on the beach, the rocks, whatever that is. Man, it's got some scenes that really stick out to me. So I thought this for sure would be much higher, but yeah, I ended up giving it a 7.5. And I think it earns every one of those points. Multi, I only heard 2 issues from you.
One.
Think we know it. Oh, okay. Okay. So what's your score, sir?
9.7. Near perfection. It's a masterpiece. I liked it. And thank you for suggesting such movie. I think you suggested really, really cool movies for this current season we are doing. I did happen to see some of the movies we will cover in like 2 weeks or so, and man, you surprised me a lot. And now we are going into a Blade 2. What did you think of it, Superbald?
That one also holds up. The better production values. I think they had a higher budget, and the CG is much, much better. As I said, though, the way they brought back Whistler is absolutely contrived. I find that you really have to stretch to suspend disbelief for that, but whatever. Yeah, amazing cast. Ron Perlman, I love him in this movie. He's a great. I love that guy, and he was just fantastic in this movie. A young Norman Reedus before Walking Dead. Yeah, the character of Assad, who was like the messenger, he was played by Dan. I was amazed. I forgot this. I didn't realize it was this dude. It was played by Danny John Jules, who was Cat from the British sitcom Red Dwarf. I was very happy to see that guy.
I didn't realize that was him. Oh,
yeah.
man, that's awesome.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't have much of the cast written down, but Lenore Valera, who played Nysa, I found her acting a bit stilted and her line delivery stilted. But mind you, English is not her first language, so that could be part of it. This was directed by Guillermo del Toro, and it really shows. It has a lot of his signatures. Like a lot of sequels, though, they just took sort of like what worked about the first one and just added more. Dialed it up to 11, and so this movie is like almost nonstop action from beginning to end, which is not a bad thing. This one is also, I noticed, alternated between tinted blue and tinted orange, like a lot of movies are today. But at the time, this wasn't. It was among the first to do that. It wasn't like the overused and the trope like it is today, and it really fit. And it really fit with the aesthetic of the film, so I didn't mind it. At one point, though, Norman Reedus, his character, says, The Dark Knight Returns," which just plays, further cements the Batman analogy that I was making earlier. I kind of his character, though, betraying them, I kind of saw that's coming a mile away. I'm not sure why. Maybe just because I remembered it, but yeah, other than that, I don't have a whole lot to say. Like, I think it's in some ways an inferior film to the first one, but in other ways it's much superior too.
Okay, I guess I take over, except if you'd like to add more.
No.
Okay, well, I got a second some of what you said. I feel like this is like the first one, but they did everything better and cooler, more action. I like action. Like I'm a sellout to action. If you give me action, I can forgive your sins. Um, I thought, and maybe that's my memory that was bad, but I thought the reveal at the very end of Norman Reedus backstabbing the group was kind of cool, and I was kind of surprised, and I feel like it's kind of justified why the vampires would just let him live in the van early in the movie. Um, so that's kind of cool. Uh, Blade growth into saving the girl at the end was kind of cool, and the most interesting part is Blade's enemies are now his allies for a war against worst threat, and I like the idea,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's fun.
that's kind of a trope, but yeah, like the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of thing. But yeah, that was interesting.
And I feel like even if the Mad Max thing would be cool, I feel like that could have been a third movie, because as the second movie, that's perfect. Like just having Blade sighting with all of these other vampire that just want to skin him alive or something. That was kind of cool. They all try to get a shot at him, and they all get defeated and all. And what's interesting is, even despite the backstab, Blade was a few steps ahead of Norman Reedus' character, and that was cool. And I thought the villain had a lot of charisma. As much as the villain were cool in the first one, I felt like in that one they were just slightly above what they were in the first one. So I feel like this is a superior movie in almost every aspect, and more great flashy action I enjoyed. More sword fight I enjoyed. That movie is just fun. Um, Blade being the leader of the group was really cool, and he kind of deserves it because he's the pro at just destroying vampires. Um, the most interesting part, again, I said it, is him getting double crossed but still managing to survive, and it didn't feel contrived. And the father figure being back, I wasn't a fan, but I won't really hold it against the movie because he needed an ally that's genuinely on his side. So I can forgive the movie for undermining what they did in the first one. Um, Outside of that, again, I enjoyed the action. That movie is fabulous, and I will let Gray talk about Blade 2.
Sure. So yeah, I'm seconding a bunch of everything that you guys are saying. So Superbald brought up that he thought there was a higher budget on this one. You're totally right. They had about $10 million more on this, and a lot of that money went into these giant sets. So it did a little bit of shooting in Toronto, but the film is based in Prague, like where the characters are supposed to actually be, like in the actual world. But then in real life, they also shot it in Prague. They were just able to get their money to go a little bit further and make these giant sets, which all the sets are super detailed, like down to like
Yeah.
the last little.
Well, the sets were in this movie were really well done. They were really amazing. Like at no point to me that it feel like fake. Sometimes you can just tell,
Mhm.
okay, this is a set. This is not a real place. But in this movie, it didn't feel like that.
100%. And man, the set decoration on this was just awesome. It felt like they're kind of taking everything up one notch. Like I do like the blood temple or whatever you call that at the end of the first Blade, but the kind of temple, the main bad guy, now I'm forgetting his name, the Nosferatu like one, who's got kind of this, I don't know, it's almost like a Roman temple under this very modern building. Just that whole set, it almost seems like kind of like a Bond set in a way. Just man, I dig a lot of what they put into this. And then when you think of like the nightclub or the sewer sets, there's just some really interesting thing that they were able to pull off. So it looks like a higher production value to me. And then we run into the problem of CG. This was 2002, so it's not exactly cutting edge CG.
Yeah, but I still found it better than the first one.
So part of that is the way that Guillermo del Toro did it. So he didn't want to just rely on practical effects, and he didn't want to just rely on CG. So he kind of did this amalgam where sometimes some of the Reapers were partially like, so they had actors and prosthetics, but they also had these like robot torsos, and then they tried to go ahead and enhance that with CG. Sometimes it really works, sometimes it doesn't. But there's some really interesting ideas that were kind of put into this one. So this did, instead of going to Norrington, Guillermo del Toro stepped up, and man, so he had just done Kronos, which is kind of this other vampire-ish film, but he was possibly going to do the first Blade, and then was like, I just did this one. I don't want to be known as the vampire movie guy. So he didn't accept that, and ended up going to Norrington, and then Norrington didn't want to do the second one. So Del Toro ended up coming up as the actual one for this. It was still written by David S. Goyer, who's the one who wrote the first one. He wrote the second one, and then he wrote and directed the third one. So Goyer is all over the place on all of these films. And man, if you watch like the commentary or the behind the scenes, it doesn't seem like Guillermo del Toro really liked David S. Goyer. He kind of said like, his writing is very juvenile, especially like the dialogue. I think in this one, man, it seems like Wesley Snipes only has like 10 lines, something like that. Like a lot of it is everybody else explaining something, then he's like, yeah. It's interesting. True. But it still has enough of that. Like he really does know this character inside and out. And man, I just dig what he's doing in this one. So they did have some issues with some things. Oh, sorry. Getting back to that, I'm forgetting. Was it Tracy Lords was the one from the first one?
Yeah.
There is a character. Yes, sorry, Tracy Lords. There is a character in this that's supposed to be Tracy Lord's sister. So she's
the one with the red hair.
Yes, exactly. So like they don't make that explicit, but apparently that's supposed to be that character's sister, the one who is partnered up with Lighthammer or whatever his name is, and then ends up taking them both out. I don't know why. It's not like that is this huge thing going, but there was some lore that they tried to bring in from the first one to the second one, some weird continuity, but yeah. So I dig everyone in the Blood Pack, and I guess the Blood Pack is really what convinced Guillermo del Toro to do it. Is like, whoa, I could make this kind of vampire team. Like that sounds kind of fun, and it does have that, the tropey. All right, let's get the team together. Everyone's got these funky nicknames. We got like Chupa, Lighthammer, Frost. Now I'm forgetting like half of them, but good times. What is a team if you don't have a bunch of fun nicknames? It really brings it together. Snowman, I forgot. Donnie Yen was Snowman. So they had like 3 fight choreographers in this, and one of them happened to be Donnie Yen, who plays Snowman. He's the Asian one of the group who you don't actually get to see him do anything really cool. I was waiting for something amazing, but apparently a lot of Blade's moves were choreographed by him. Then they had somebody else doing the sword choreography, and there's one other choreographer. One for the wire work, excuse me. So it was really kind of interesting. I guess what Wesley Snipes says that this one is his favorite Blade movie out of the 3. I guess now 4. And, I can see why. So the sets are just huge. And I think the fact that you're now getting him to team up with these vampires who, you saw him just take them out unceremoniously in the last one. They're not that big of a threat. But if you make him part of this team and you have to go after this much bigger threat, like Multi was saying, that adds this entire other element to it. And I love the way that they went with this, as opposed to what the first one was supposed to be, this like post-apocalyptic wasteland where everyone's a vampire. That sounds like it would get really boring, where this one, it's kind of the next step in evolution, I guess, of the vampire lore. And it's not kind of an unseen thing. There is kind of this Polish tradition of like these vampires, instead of having like fangs, they have this like finger in their mouth that they're able to kind of pierce someone and drink through in a weird way. I guess it's more of a straw than a finger, but he's kind of pulling towards some of that. But then he was also looking at some interesting animals that kind of have these mandibles that can open, and man, it makes the Reapers really seem like a new threat. Not only are they kind of unstoppable, but then they've got this interesting bone structure over just their heart for some reason, and somehow that happens really quickly after a bite. Same thing with the jaw and anatomy just completely changing. I don't understand it, but whatever. It's magic. It works. But yeah, that autopsy scene, that felt like it was kind of taking it up to a new level. I guess a lot of over 30 members of the cast were temporarily blinded by a misuse of UV lights during that autopsy scene. So that's kind of interesting.
Tragic.
Yeah. I mean, they got their sight back, but again, isn't it worth it for this amazing scene? So you guys mentioned like the double crossing. They set that up interestingly. So I'm not sure if you did just remember it Superbald or if you caught up on like the foreshadowing, but when there's like one line that Blade gives away, like keep your enemies close or keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And right as he says that, Scud's like right behind him. And he kind of gives this look to Whistler, and it seems like Whistler's like, oh, okay. They do kind of set this up, but I do like that whole Blade being.
I did cut it up. I was
Yeah.
surprised. I was like, oh, that's actually okay.
So they set it up that way. When the vampires enter their lair, they seem to know exactly where the cameras are, and they like use I can't remember what the lasers are to like basically take them out. But it's not like they're exploring looking for the cameras. They seem to know exactly where they are. It seems like there's a few like subtle things that you can kind of piece together. Like, oh, okay, so he picked up on these things. He knew exactly what was going on. He knew he was being double crossed from the beginning, but there is this new kind of threat, or so he thinks. It's kind of interesting. And there's just so many things that are similar to the first one, but they do seem upgraded. Again, we have like some amazing sets, but one of them, that nightclub, it just, man, that does seem like it is a step up from one of the warehouse raves that was going on with Deacon Frost. Instead, we've got this, forget what they called the club, but you get people just like cutting on each other, razor blade kisses, a bunch of interesting things that like, okay, so if you had super quick healing, what would you do around your kind? I don't know. It's got that really disturbing scene of the guy cutting the lady's back like down to the spine. That seems painful. Like, they seem to feel pain, but when the one guy got his hand blown off by the sword in the first one, he didn't seem too upset about it. He was kind of laughing. So maybe pain to them is something different. But I thought that was a different look at it. And then they have interesting things like for some reason, like the super uppity ups are having like blood jello, which I don't know exactly what that is, but it looks interesting. I don't think I've seen that. Usually it's kind of the trope of like blood in a wine glass or something, but I hadn't seen blood jello. And then at one point there's also blood coke, which I don't know what that is. If they're like adding blood to cocaine or I don't know, but there were people snorting lines of red stuff that apparently was blood. I don't know. I kind of dig it, but yeah, interesting. And then they kind of do some humor in this too, and I think it lands. So not only do you get like the Snipes humor, which is awesome as Blade, but some of the other guys kind of add into it as well. Where like Wesley Snipes asks the one guy like, "What type of are you also a vampire?" And he's like, "Nah, I'm a lawyer." I dug that part. The lawyer joke really worked for me. I completely forgot about that one. But yeah, there's some really cool things. And then I think Superbald touched on it, but this one, just visually, it looks a lot different. There are a couple of scenes that do kind of have that blue tone, but I totally forgot how many kind of yellows and kind of amber colors this actually had, like especially with the color treatment. It doesn't, I guess why this doesn't kind of stick out in my mind. I'm thinking of kind of that Matrix looking first one where it's got a very blue tone to everything. And man, this one, I don't know, it just looked beautiful to me. I really like the way that he kind of did the amberish color
Yeah,
treatment.
really
It
good,
just,
really good cinematography and really good color palette.
for sure. And he just had the cameras just moving in this one, and he really knew how to kind of film some of the action stuff. So this one, unlike the other two, it's the only one that actually has the ending. It didn't require any reshoots, but it is actually the ending as written, where Blade 3 went through some extensive reshoots, Blade 1 went through some extensive reshoots, but this one, they actually did it. And it doesn't end with a sword fight. There still is a sword thing, but sword fight endings kind of seem to be David S. Goyer's go-to, apparently. So yeah, it's kind of interesting with that. So we mentioned a bit of Scud, but I didn't notice it like the other times that I was watching it. But it's kind of interesting that Scud's wearing a Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense T-shirt, which is the agency in Hellboy. So it's kind of interesting.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Guillermo del Toro has this kind of working relationship with Mike Mignola. He actually had him design the kind of layer underneath the modern building at the end. That was like drawn by Hellboy's Mike Mignola. And man, it really has this kind of weird Bond layer kind of thing to it. But it's interesting. I guess as a director, you bump onto certain actors, or you kind of know who you can count on. It is interesting to see Perlman in this one, but there's one other guy who's in like 3 of Guillermo del Toro's films, as well as this one. He's the guy that Blade lets go, and then the very last scene where he kind of goes after him, the dude with the weird glasses and the long hair. He's been in a bunch of them. I think it was Pan's Labyrinth, and I can't remember if it's Kronos, but he's in at least 3 of his films, which is awesome. Yeah, and there's a bunch of other interesting things in this one. Snipes. So unlike 3, in this one, Snipes wasn't available to shoot all the time. So there's like 2 major scenes where it's just Wesley Snipes' stunt double. One of them is that autopsy scene. If you look, a lot of it shows Blade from behind, or just like kind of an arm or something like that, where he's standing in there, but it's not showing like his actual facial reaction. He's not actually there. The stunt double filled in for him, and there's a couple of other scenes where that happened as well. But this one had a real reason behind it. He was in production on like 3 films at the time. So 3 additional films, I should say. So he had an excuse, unlike 3, where apparently he tried to choke out David S. Goyer, the writer-director, and then he wouldn't leave his trailer. He just was in there smoking pot.
Yeah, and he would only communicate with David S. Goyer through Post-it notes or something like that,
Yes.
I read.
And he only allowed people to call him Blade on the set of Blade 3. Where this one, he seemed like he was more human. He I guess when he got back into the on set the first day, he put on the outfit, and he's like, yes, this feels right. But by the time Blade 3 came around, he was already in that character. He was not willing to get out of it. But yeah, it's weird. Like, I don't know if you guys have watched any of the behind the scenes stuff on 3, Blade Trinity, but
No.
man, Patton Oswalt was on that a little bit. He's in the movie a little bit, but he's got this one story that he tells about Wesley Snipes refused to even like open his eyes during one scene. So there's a scene where he's like laying on a slab, and then he's supposed to open his eyes, and he just refused to. So they had to CGI eyes onto him, and it looks so bad.
Wow.
If you guys get a chance, like look at the Patton Oswalt story of that. It's hilarious.
I'm gonna look
I
that
need
up.
to watch that before or after I rewatch Trinity.
You should, if you ever watch it again. But if you
After
don't,
or before.
But yeah, 3 also had a bunch of scenes that were shot with stuntmen instead of Wesley Snipes, but that's just because he refused to leave his trailer. And yeah, at one point he did choke out David S. Goyer. but maybe that guy shouldn't have been the director. But yeah, it's really kind of fun in the commentary for 2. Guillermo del Toro puts a lot of I don't know, jabs into David S. Goyer's writing and especially his dialogue. And then he mentions, although there is a certain poetry to now you've got an explosive device attached to the back of your head. So I don't know. In a weird way, he respected some of the straightforward writing, but at the same time, it's like it's not great writing. So I think ideally Guillermo del Toro would have had somebody else come in and rewrite the second one, but still, from what he got, just man, this film is a lot more iconic than I remembered, and it kind of steps up a lot of what that first one did, especially with that club scene. I don't know why it was just completely gone from my memory, but it kind of came flooding back once I saw that. It's like, oh yeah, I remember the stupid razor blade kisses. I remember like the person getting like heavily I don't know, being cut on their back deeply. I don't know. One thing I guess that kind of is a gaffe in that to me is everybody that saw Blade from the first one, wouldn't they have immediately known that it's Blade and just started like running out of that club? I guess it is in Prague, so maybe his, I don't know, reputation doesn't precede him there. But I would think that a lot of these people were like, oh, it's Blade, and then would run away because apparently he's legendary. But yeah, I really like the addition of the team, and I guess the 2 years of training to come after him wasn't quite enough. So yeah, overall though, really awesome film. It ended up grossing 155 million, so again about 3 times the budget. So it was considered a success as well, but yeah, that's kind of where the success stops.
Okay. I'm excited about rewatching the third one or watching it for the first time because I will be honest, I can't remember the third one.
I forgot 2 other things. So David S. Goyer's original idea was to use Morbius as the primary villain, and it was all set up until they were practically in production, and then all of a sudden New Line lost the rights to it. Instead, the rights for Morbius was put to somebody else, and they made a movie or attempted to make a movie, and that fell through. So the first time we actually get to see Morbius on screen is, the interesting one, the Morbin Time movie. But yeah, initially it would have been him. So I don't know if they would have had him with like a mandible jaw that opens, if he would have been like I don't know. I'm not sure if they would have taken as many liberties as they did with like the first one. And then there's one other cameo that we completely missed out on that would have been amazing. Apparently Michael Jackson was going to be in the House of Pain sequence. So
really?
Yeah, so he was supposed to be in that nightclub. He was supposed to be a vampire pimp, which, my God, I want to see Michael Jackson as a vampire pimp. It would have been so awesome. I guess he had to drop out, so they ended up shooting that scene with another actor, and then that just ended up getting cut completely for pacing. But man, I would have loved to see MJ as a vampire pimp.
Damn, yeah, I would have loved to see that too.
Everyone would.
I think that's about all I got.
That's so out of character for him too. So,
and it would have been 2002 as well. Like I don't know. I think we all needed that, but sadly we didn't get it.
Yeah.
I guess we will ask Superbald, do you want to add anything else, or are you ready to share your grade?
No, nothing to add really. I think this is just slightly superior to the first movie, so I gave an 8 to the first one. I'm going to give an 8.5 to this one.
I feel you. I am with you. I will let Greg go second on the grade. What would be your grade out of 10?
I'm pretty much right there with Superbald. I gave the first one 7.5. This one I'm giving an 8. I don't know why this one didn't stick out as much in my memory. Maybe it's because I had I can't remember if it was the VHS or DVD of the first one. I definitely watched that way more than this one. But yeah, I do remember watching and enjoying this one. But I think Trinity just kind of skewed my memory of the last 2 in this trilogy. But yeah, I'll go with 8. Multi, what do you score on this one as?
I had no issue, and I thought that was a masterpiece. It's a great movie. I give a 10 out of 10 to Blade 2. classic, a must watch if it's not done yet. And just before we move on to the outro, I gotta say, it's interesting how we got Blade 2 in 2002, and we also got Spider-Man in 2002. So 2002 had two great movies, Marvel related. That's interesting. Now, I gotta say,
But neither of them were a part of the official MCU because that wasn't even really a thing yet.
yeah,
But yes, they are Marvel related.
it's impressive. 23 years ago, we used to make great comic book movies. With that being said, I guess we are moving to the outro. We had a lot of people invested into hearing our thoughts, which is amazing. And we are out once I find the right button there, the right one.
Sure.
Yeah, Red Blue Podcast. Come check the scene. Movies old and new. Know what I mean? The Red Blue Podcast. Come check the scene. Movies old and new. Know what I mean?